August 1st, 2025, a tax bomb from U.S. President Donald Trump could be triggered, threatening exports from the EU and Mexico. The 30% import tariff, if enforced, will not only shake transatlantic trade relations, but could also spark an unprecedented retaliatory tariff war. What about the EU and Mexico? How are they responding to this move from the White House? Join us as we follow the latest developments in Trump's tariff war in this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated with the hottest global news. We'll keep you informed with the latest developments. Now, let's get back to today's main topic. On July 12th, on the Truth Social platform, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a tax notice sent to the European Union and Mexico. According to the letter, starting August 1st, goods originating from Mexico and the EU entering the U.S. will face a 30% import tariff. Goods transshipped to evade this tariff will face an even higher rate. As in previous letters, President Trump stated that businesses in these economies would be exempt from the tariff if they decide to build factories or produce goods in the U.S. He also warned that if Mexico and the EU retaliate, their new tariffs would increase correspondingly. Additionally, Trump predicted that tariff revenue would surge significantly within the next month. Speaking to reporters at Joint Base Andrews, he indicated that the tariffs on imported goods would soon reach what he described as extremely high levels.
That our country made $25 billion last month, $25 billion. It hasn't done that in a long time, and a lot of that's done because of good management, and number one, and maybe even more importantly, the tariffs that are pouring in. We have tariffs pouring in at levels that we have never seen before, and they've only just started. That's really a small portion. It's mostly from cars and aluminum and steel, a little bit of lumber. But they'll really start in about another week, and then in about a month they'll come in at levels that are extremely strong. We're dealing with other countries and certain countries that would rather have a deal than a regular tariff. And we're willing, if they're willing to open up. These are countries that have been shut to us, but we've been open to them. In other words, they wouldn't let us do business there, but they would do business in our country. Not a fair deal. So the European Union is talking to us. They want to open up their country. I would say Japan to a much lesser extent in terms of opening up their country. Japan, as you know, and we're very close to Japan, but they sell us millions and millions of cars a year. We sell them no cars because they won't accept our cars. And they won't accept much of our agriculture either. So,
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that he will actively work with French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen to find ways to address the escalating trade war with the United States.
If it were to happen, then we would be able to put large parts of our economic policy efforts on the back burner because that would overshadow everything and hit the German export industry to the core. But I would like to say, once again, that this is precisely why I have been traveling so much. Incidentally, the G7, Europe, the European Summit, and the NATO Summit were in the Chancellor myself, and it goes without saying that I attend these events, but I also do them to represent Germany well, to make our voice heard, and to ensure that these tariffs of this magnitude do not materialize. And that requires two things: unity within the European Union and sensible dialogue with the American president. But not before August 1st. And I discussed this intensively over the weekend with both Macron and Ursula von der Leyen with the U.S. president on Friday. We want to use this time now, the 2.5 weeks until August 1st, to find a solution, and I am really committed to this. The negotiations were already quite far along. We have also seen that with other countries, Canada, China. There have been many such letters. At the end of the day, they were also negotiating positions. And then there were usually, not always, but mostly, sensible solutions. And I am fighting for this, for Europe.
French cheese and wine producers have warned that the 30% tariff threatened by U.S. President Donald Trump on EU imports would cause severe damage to France's agricultural sector.
This is a very important market for us. This market accounts for around 350 million euros yearly for dairy products, cheeses in particular. We export 25 tons of cheese to the United States yearly. And so this is a shock, although unfortunately we were expecting it a bit. We were starting to see quite significant figures on the evolution of the tariffs. But 30% is really a shock, and it's a very bad signal sent by the United States to its European trade partners. This measure comes as part of a desire of the United States president and the new administration in the United States to put in place a system that completely shakes up international trade and that creates shock effects among its trade partners. It really redefines trade as we have known it in the world since the end of World War II. On the market of entry-range cheeses, or so-called commodity-type products, the price elasticity will be a lot higher. And so we could see that within the 350 million in earnings that this represents each year, this could represent several tens of millions of euros of potential losses which we could forecast. We're talking about August 1st. That's coming quickly. That's in about 2 weeks. So I have trouble seeing how we can achieve negotiations that have not been successful for months. So unfortunately, I am not very optimistic, but we'll leave space for discussions. And I think the president of the European Commission has also shown her interest in being able to talk up to the end. And so we hope that reason will prevail and that the trade interests that link us with the United States, which are important and historic, last.
Bouard also stated that the industry may need to reconsider its strategy and the markets in which it currently operates.
If we want to preserve the exports and the value for all our actors, especially French agriculture and farmers, if some markets are more difficult to approach, we have to find others. And we have to be very proactive. And we really need French economic diplomacy to help us open these markets. Tomorrow, will the current map of our exports be the same in 10 years? Maybe not. And so it's up to us to adapt. And good for us. The dairy and cheese industries that I represent are very agile and know how to adapt to conditions that are sometimes a bit turbulent. But we are prepared for this, and in any case, we remain vigilant and ready to modify our trade zones.
Cyrus de la Rubia, chief economist at Hamburg Commercial Bank, has called for the European Union to take a tougher stance in response to the latest tariff threats from U.S. President Donald Trump.
But obviously, this is a big shock overall, because 30%, this is on the upper end of the expectation that markets had with respect to the outcome of the so-called negotiations. If you look at the trade issue in an isolated way, I would very much recommend to take a hard stance, because in my view, and this is also confirmed by economic models, the United States might even suffer more than the European Union from those tariffs which are implemented by or planned to be implemented by the European Union.
Amid speculation that the EU might impose retaliatory measures, the European Union has stated that it still prioritizes a negotiated solution with the United States. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced that the bloc will extend the suspension of retaliatory measures against U.S. tariffs until early August.
The United States have sent us a letter with measures that would come into effect unless there is a negotiated solution. So we will therefore also extend the suspension of our countermeasures till early August. And at the same time, we will continue to prepare further countermeasures so we are fully prepared. Very important in this is always the second and the third element. The second element is to diversify our trade relationships. So this big and important political agreement on a free trade agreement with Indonesia is today a huge milestone forward and shows that we are looking for new open market. So we have, as you know, a two-track approach. That's very important. We have always been very clear that we prefer a negotiated solution. This remains the case, and we will use the time that we have now till the 1st of August. And on the second track, since the very beginning, we have worked and now are ready to respond with countermeasures. We've prepared for this, and we can respond with countermeasures if necessary. So this two-track approach pays off because we are prepared. On your question, as you know, we have prepared and agreed on a first list of countermeasures. We have developed a second potential list of countermeasures that is by now agreed to. And the ACI is created for extraordinary situations. We are not there yet. This is very important. This is now the time for negotiations, but this also shows we are prepared for all eventual scenarios.
Some German economists also noted that if the U.S. tariffs are imposed, American consumers would be the ones most harmed, while also stating that the EU still holds certain advantages in negotiations. One option for the EU is to pressure U.S. companies doing well in Europe so that these businesses in turn pressure the White House.
The tariffs will provoke an inflationary impact in the United States. And inflation means less purchasing power for the people and for consumers. And the United States is very much reliant on consumption as a driver of United States economic growth. And by this way, it will take quite a significant hit the economy. And so there is some leverage here. And I think the hope is more that you put pressure on those companies, and those companies go to the White House and put pressure on those who are responsible there and say, okay, let's. Why don't you think this twice if it's really necessary to do this?
Germany, Europe's largest economy, is a major exporter to the United States with products such as cars and auto parts, machinery, and pharmaceuticals. In 2024, Germany exported goods worth 161 billion euros, equivalent to 188 billion USD, to the US, generating a trade surplus of nearly 70 billion euros. Mr. De La Rubia stated that Germany is currently in a relatively strong position to absorb some of the trade sanctions if they occur.
With respect to GDP growth, to growth of the economy, I think that our forecast is right now, without these tariffs, for Germany at 1.6% and for the European Union at around 1.3%. Now, if these tariffs came into place, then we would have to bring down this growth forecast to 1.3% for Germany for next year, for 2026. We are talking about 2026, and for the European Union to around 1%. So lower, not a catastrophe for the markets, but still quite significantly lower, is that Germany is quite well positioned to face this external crisis, because they are in the process of implementing this huge infrastructure program of 500 billion euro. They are at the same time as other European countries as well, increasing their defense spending from 2 percentage points of GDP to 5 percentage points of GDP. And this obviously could counterbalance the loss of demand from the United States.
Meanwhile, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum also expressed confidence that an agreement with the United States could be reached before the 30% tariff announced by U.S. President Donald Trump officially takes effect on August 1st.
Very early today, a letter signed by President Trump was released stating that a 30% tariff will be imposed on all goods exported from Mexico to the USA. We believe, based on what our colleagues discussed yesterday, that we will reach an agreement with the USA and that we will, of course, achieve better conditions. We are clear on what we can work with the USA, and we are clear on what we cannot. And there is something that is never negotiated, ever, and that is the sovereignty of our country.
In recent days, U.S. President Donald Trump has continuously sent tax notices to trading partners. To date, 25 countries have received these letters. The new tariff rates range from 20 to 50%, mostly lower than or equivalent to the levels announced on April 2nd. Many countries have indicated they will continue negotiations with the U.S. to reach trade agreements before the new tariffs take effect on August 1st.